The recent back and forth between the national chairman Adams Oshiomhole and John Oyegun, the APC National Publicity Secretary Lanre Issa-Onilu has said the immediate past National Working Committee led by John Odigie-Oyegun as national chairman lacked the courage required to confront the pockets of political despots who could not operate by the party's rules. Where's all this leading to? I still have my guest in the studio, Mr. Patrick Martins-Lumba, and of course we're going to look at this, we're going to tear it apart bit by bit. Now, first things first, there are people who have called on, the vice chairman of the party was the first to call on Adams Oshiomhole to step aside because fingers were all pointing in his direction for the problems that the party has faced before, during and after the elections. And he said if he did have any sense of decency, he would step aside. And right after that, we have a former leader of the same party speaking up. But instead of speaking to his assistant, he decided to speak to Odigie-Oyegun. And I remember there's a line in that statement being put out by Lanre Issa-Onilu saying, if you do not like it, you can go join the PDP or any other opposition. Let's start from the beginning. The man Adams Oshiomhole, I always ask people, was he really suitable for the job? Or maybe he's just too straightforward for the likes of the people in the APC.
Now, we must acknowledge Oshiomhole's background as someone operating on the side of labor. Protestations, strikes, confrontations, and all of that. And at some point, you may use the word impunity.
Impunity?
Yes, I have had occasion to participate at a protest, fuel subsidy protests during Obasanjo's regime, in company of Wole Soyinka and Oshiomhole. So, from a close observation, I am of the view that indeed his temperament could be termed extreme from close observation. I may be wrong. However, what are the facts of the matter? The person who accused him and suggested that he should resign, he made certain allegations that you cannot really just push aside. For instance, APC lost some states, vital states, if you may want to consider their weight.
And still recently lost again in Zamfara.
Yes, and the way and manner some of the primaries were held, when you say, if you sit on the fence, you are neither here nor there. You say, yes, some could go direct primaries, some could go indirect. What kind of statement is that? It is neither here nor there. And the confusion that usually follows this kind of indecision is what we're witnessing today. Having said that, certain things were said. For instance, that some of the decisions that he has had occasion to announce, to promulgate, they were solo decisions. They were supposed to hold meetings at the secretariat of the party. If indeed there is evidence to show that some of these meetings didn't hold there, then the allegations are factual. Again, it was said that some of these meetings, no minutes were taken. If meetings held at all, no minutes were taken. How do you run a party like that? So to answer your question directly, it will appear to me that indeed Oshiomhole is not suitable to operate as a party chairman.
Can you really say that? Because some people would say that he was successful at being a labor leader. And, well, I don't know if he was successful as a governor.
I do not agree.
I said some people, they have a right to their opinion.
Yes.
But looking at his government, because I watched it closely, I cannot tell for sure if he was such a great governor. But leading the party, I mean, if he was successful as being a labor leader, which is almost the same kind of leadership if you're running a party, can you really say he's not fit for the job? You need to be strong and firm and rascally to run that kind of office.
Not really. What is democracy if the people cannot really have a voice? Then it is useless. The reason for democracy is so that we can trade words, we can compare ideas, and we can now say this is the best way forward, a decision of the majority. That is just what it is. Nobody is going to run a fiefdom. Nobody is going to say that he inherited power, at least in the scheme of things in Nigeria. So to that extent, if we're running a democracy, you cannot run democracy by holding meetings outside of your secretariat, by not having minutes of meetings, by not having any referrals of sorts, and taking people, if you like, on a whim. You know, it is very inappropriate for a party in a multi-party democracy, in a presidential system of government. It is very inappropriate, and those are the facts of the matter. So for me, Oshiomhole, even as a leader, a labor leader, I had issues with him. But again, this is a country where if you can be properly hyped, are you with me? For some reason, it is taking that guy is tough. What is toughness? If you're tough and at the end of the day everybody is drinking Gary, for goodness sake, it has no meaning. But if you're soft and we can all have beef, we can all have nutrients, we can all feed properly, for goodness sake, remain weak, because we're better off that way.
So talking about internal democracy in the party, because we presume that Nigeria has a system of government which is democracy, even though we have a Nigerian way of doing things. If there is no internal democracy within parties, what people are you actually fielding for these offices? Because from the look of things, there were so many strange bedfellows in the APC with different wants and needs that were not met. And let's say, for example, the APC left and started, in fact, the APC was started because of the likes of the PDP and how they handled internal party politics. But here we are, 4 years down the line, and we still have a replica of what you were running from. What does this say about the APC and Nigeria? Because we have these politicians crisscrossing from party A to party B, all because of interest.
That's an answer straight up for the question you just asked. APC is populated in the main by PDP renegades, people who felt that if they remained in PDP, they were not likely to get a slice of the national cake, in quotes. So they all moved to a place where they felt they stood a better chance, a vantage position, to be able to still put their hand somewhere and grab something. Now, for the Oshiomhole himself, don't forget that there is some accusation somewhere, you know, that even for the candidates that wanted to run, you know, they had to make some kind of financial, you know, contribution to. There's allegation of corruption.
Yeah, but
yes,
there are no proofs to back it up.
Well,
so
because there isn't any public inquiry into that matter. But I believe that with all of this that is happening, in a little while, if the powers that be are no longer, they don't find use for him any longer, we're going to see all of that, and we're going to hear all of that. That is how it is in Nigerian politics, unfortunately.
But the party has said, and they didn't mince words, if you are not comfortable with the new rules, please go to the PDP or go to any other opposition. There are people who have hopes for the APC, those who are within the APC, the likes of the vice chairman of the party, who's asking that, you know, Oshiomhole steps aside so the party can heal. What is the future of the APC, even after this administration finishes its next 4 years? Do we see it as a house that is still together, a progressive house, or what does the future hold for them?
There are strong issues within the polity that are actually going to make it almost impossible for APC to actually flourish as a political party.
Why? Why do you think so?
Just a minute. In fairness to Oshiomhole, he came with, if you like, a good blueprint, so to say, even though we didn't see it in writing, but from what he said, party discipline, and then everybody falling in line and towing the party, if you like, supremacy and all of that. But with what we witnessed, you know, before the primaries, after the primaries, I remember also saying that even Lagos, for some reason, people chose not to contest it, it will appear. But the primaries in Lagos remain faulty till tomorrow, because from the lips of Oshiomhole, he said that the people who conducted the primaries were not the people that were sent by the party. That is a very heavy statement, and it remains to be.
There have been so many statements by Oshiomhole that, you know.
So many of these things don't, if you like, don't present the APC mode as a coherent party. I don't know if you get where I'm coming from.
I'm trying to understand.
Now, let me simplify it. You know, APC as a party, the challenge they are going to have, mind you, the bigger polity, there has been this unwritten understanding that you do 2 terms from the north, we expect that it will come to the south for another 2 terms. At some point, a president died, his vice decided to continue. And at some point, the vice now sought a 2nd term, which he didn't get. Now, Muhammadu Buhari has come in, and we have all seen the dimension that his government has taken. Let me say very categorically that with what I see, I doubt very much that the APC is willing to shift ground. By that I mean to say that yes, party, the next president will come from the south. And I don't even see PDP being able to muster the courage to say, you know what, we're going to stick with a southerner this time. That really is where the problem is. And all of the infighting we're seeing in APC has a lot to do, apparently, with the interest of an Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the interest of an El Rufai, the interest of Eherocha Sokorocha. This triangle of names that I just mentioned, they are the reason why the APC is appearing the way it is appearing. And by 2023, if care is not taken, Muhammadu Buhari will remain in power. Quote me.
Well, we don't see that happening. That's against the Constitution. But
okay,
if you mentioned the PDP as not being even able to play good opposition, do we see an emergence of a new political party, a new political front, a fresh one? Don't forget, we also have these new springing up parties of young people with the, you know, not too young to run mantra, and a few people who tested the waters this past election. Do we see them coming together to form a coalition, which they were not able to form before the elections? Is that going to happen anytime soon?
I think that in the interests of Nigerians, or should I say for the interest of Nigerians, it is very important at this time that young people should come together. It is very important that young people should demand and actually take power. I say this because the people who we're struggling with right now, they started quite early. You know, if it's Zik, if it's Awolowo, if it's Muhammadu Buhari, if it's all of these people, they started quite early. And it is quite strange that young people do not realize the kind of power that they have in their hands. And unless they come together, the whole effort that we are trying to make or suggest is just futile. You know, with what happened in 2019, I recall that soldiers were everywhere. And I did mention that in Rivers State, women stood against the barrel of the gun. It would have been better if it was young people that stood against the barrel of the gun. So for the future, the immediate future, I believe that the young people will make all of the difference against an APC, against the PDP, and they just have to start molding the building blocks now. They don't have to wait. Interesting.
We also see, I want to ask about our democracy as it is right now. I don't know if it's fragile, if it's whole, if it is even a democracy that we're operating. If these people who said they were coming to stir the waters and change things were unable to also have their own house in order, does this mirror the fact that we haven't yet grasped the idea of a democracy or even working together as a front in Nigeria? I'm talking about the likes of Obi Ezekwesili and the man from Central Bank, and Fela Duritoye, the likes of all of those people who came as reformers or the new front. They were unable to, you know, put their house together, hence the reason why they all had their names on the ballot. Apart from Donald Duke, who also in the SDP had their own problems. So, is this even ever achievable? Does this also show that Nigeria and Nigerians are not necessarily ready for what we call a democracy?
No, I think that usually, if the structure is the way it is, it will be very difficult for anybody to tilt the balance. And for Nigeria, it is a peculiar, unfortunate reality that we are facing. And if we must be honest with ourselves, until we tackle the governmental problematic structure, for instance, we cannot say that we are a federation when the federating units are so incapacitated. That is number one. Number two, even the youths that I mentioned earlier, because they also don't have the capacity. As at the time most of these elders were youths, they had sufficient capacity to take on the system. Today, the present youths don't have the capacity to challenge the system.
What do you mean by the capacity? We have them on Twitter and social media yapping away. We have them spewing intelligent ideas. But
yes.
What other capacity do the average Nigerian young people need to take on these people who have been in power forever?
Do you know what happened this 2019? You mentioned the Fela Durotoyes and all of them, that they were like reformers. They spoke all of the English. We say all of the Turanchi. They were quite articulate and what have you, but they couldn't really sway, you know, people holding their ground. How do I mean? If, for instance, I have 1 million votes, with the way Nigeria is presently structured, if the results come and they say I only had 10,000, how do I prove that I had 1 million votes? That is the challenge. You get the point. And so to that extent, some of the effort that all of these people put, the results are not really showing. Again, it will appear that all of what they did amounted to what Fela called shakara. It didn't really carry any substance. It didn't really carry any weight. The time it will carry weight is when the youth say, you know what, I dare you to cross this line. And we just have to get to that point. And I believe that that is the point that we are approaching. A point where once you lean your back on the wall and you know that you cannot really dissolve into the wall, you have to fight back.
So we're supposed to emulate the likes of Sudan, what's happening in Khartoum now, and what's happening in Zimbabwe.
Well,
what happened in Zimbabwe that ousted, you know, Uncle Robert, as we all call him? I'm just...
Sentiments will not allow us to push that in that direction.
Why?
You know, religious sentiments, you know, ethnic sentiments, class sentiments.
And I always ask, what have these sentiments been able to get for us? What have they produced for us in the long run?
That is the challenge. That is the challenge.
When are we going to be tired of this sentiment?
We must own up to these things the way they are. That is the problem. They say that if you hide your sin, you're surely going to do the wrong thing still. So for us, we are hiding the facts from, you know, for instance, I am surprised, for instance, that we have a boxer who is saying, let me wait until when I can give that fatal blow that will take out my opponent. Whereas boxing believes that you should throw certain jabs. Some of these small jabs, they amount to something at some point. So once somebody has infracted the system, what stops independent-minded people who have the capacity to challenge some of these things? If you say that somebody is not representing the federal character, you know, requirement, for goodness sake, take this matter to court. If you say somebody has fallen out of line, you know, legitimately falling out of line, take the person to court. How do I mean? Hate speech. We have instances, over a dozen instances, where some of the people in leadership today, you know, are guilty of perjury, and nobody seems to be doing anything about it. That is where the problem is. And you cannot reform a system unless you contest issues about that system in a democracy.
Well, the power to follow through, you're saying, is lacking in us today.
Very much so.
I want to thank you, Mr. Martins Lumba, for speaking with us as a political analyst. It's been an interesting conversation all evening. Well, we'll take a short break. Our package is on the remembrance of Kudirat Abiola. Take a look.
Gone but not forgotten 23 years after. This is the common emotion expressed at this procession as Nigerians here make their way to the tomb, the resting place of a human rights activist, Kudirat Abiola, the wife to the late Chief MKO Abiola, the winner of the June 12 election. She was gruesomely murdered on June 4 whilst her husband was being detained by the Nigerian government. Prior to her death, she advocated for the government of the day to allow for democracy by upholding the June 12 presidential election, as well as grant her husband freedom. It is June 4, 2019, and on the forefront of today's commemoration is Nigerian's human rights activist, Dr. Joe Odumakin, who says Chief Kudirat Abiola deserves more than a passing mention.
She ran like a thunder in the gathering of pro-democracy activists, insisting that the right thing must be done in our nation. For her stubborn defense of principles, they killed her on the streets of Lagos. We still believe and we firmly demand that Kudirat Abiola should be immortalized by naming a national monument after her.
They have declared June 12 as Democracy Day. It is welcome, but it is tokenistic. The essence of June 12 is farewell to poverty.
Hafsat Abiola, daughter of the deceased activist, is grateful that Nigerians do not forget her mother's supreme sacrifice for democracy. However, she hopes for more.
This time around, we're coming together at a time when the federal government on its own has decided that they will honor her and put her in the National Women's Hall of Fame on the 10th of June and designate her as the Nigerian martyr for democracy. So it seems as if we're finally aligning the federal government and the people of Nigeria. So I'm so happy, and I hope that this is the beginning of affirming women's role in Nigeria.
Alhaja Kudirat Abiola remains a symbol of Nigeria's struggle for democracy. 23 years after her assassination, scores of persons continue to gather at her graveside. Mary Chinda for Plus TV Africa.
It's time for my take. Now, June 4th is the anniversary of the assassination of Kudirat Abiola. She's seen to be a symbol of Nigeria's struggle for democracy, so much so that over 20 years after her death, she and her works are still remembered, thank goodness. There are several people who have gone down in history who have worked hard to secure Nigeria's democracy, some of them in the process. But a new war is coming, a war against corruption, indiscipline, terrorism, insecurity, and many more vices. Well, my urge is for Nigerians to fight so that the labors of our heroes past shall truly never be in vain. And speaking of wars, there's another one brewing in the All Progressive Congress APC. I'm wondering, from the calls for Oshiomhole to resign to Oyegun speaking against Oshiomole's regime, the question is, what is really going on? Well, I believe that Oshiomhole should do the honorable thing and step down. Better to step down with honor than to be thrown out with contempt, although there are two factions to this story, but we'll keep our eyes on it. Have a good evening and join us tomorrow as we continue on Plus Politics. I'm Marianne Nicole.